They thought he was just another biker without a license plate, till 50 military vehicles showed up to take him away. It was a calm afternoon in Colorado. The sky was clear, and the roads were not too busy. 2 state troopers were on highway patrol duty, sitting inside their cruiser parked just off the side of a long, empty stretch of road. They had already gone through a long morning shift and were hoping the rest of the day would be uneventful. But something unexpected was about to happen. In the distance, they saw a single black motorcycle speeding down the highway. It looked sleek and powerful, like something out of a movie. It wasn't just the speed that caught their attention. The rider was wearing an all-black suit and a helmet that had no visible face. It almost looked like there was no human inside, just a dark shadow moving fast on 2 wheels. One of the troopers squinted at the license plate. There wasn't one. That was their first red flag. The motorcycle was moving fast, but not dangerously fast. Still, the fact that it had no license plate made them alert. The troopers looked at each other. One of them said, "Let's pull him over. Something's off." They turned on their flashing lights and slowly drove onto the road. The black motorcycle was already a good distance ahead, but as soon as the rider saw the lights behind him, he slowed down and pulled over without hesitation. That surprised the troopers. Usually when someone is riding without a plate, they try to escape or pretend they didn't see the lights. But this guy, he just calmly pulled to the side and turned off the engine. The troopers parked behind the bike and got out of their car carefully. They didn't know what to expect. As they approached the rider, they noticed how still he was. Didn't take off his helmet or say anything, just sat there like he was waiting. The older trooper said, "Good afternoon, sir. Can I see your license and registration?" The man reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a small card. No wallet, no papers, just one ID card. He handed it over silently. The troopers looked at the card. It was a military ID. It had a photo, a name, LT, Aaron R. Cole, and a strange unit name they didn't recognize. There was a barcode, a small gold emblem in the corner, and a code that didn't match any regular identification number. The troopers glanced at each other. Something felt unusual. The younger officer took the card back to the car to run it through the system. Meanwhile, the older one stayed near the rider. "Where are you headed, sir?" he asked. The man said, "Nothing." He didn't look nervous. He didn't look rude. Just stood there, calm and emotionless. The trooper tried again. "Sir, do you know why we pulled you over?" Still no answer. Suddenly, the man raised his wrist and tapped his smartwatch. Quickly, just a few touches, maybe 4 or 5. It happened in less than 2 seconds. The officer noticed and asked, "What did you just do?" The rider replied for the first time. "Sent a message, just in case." That was all he said. His voice was low, serious, and gave no details. Back in the car, the younger trooper was frowning. "I'm getting nothing," he said. "The system doesn't recognize the ID. No record, no match, no status. It's like this guy doesn't exist." They tried federal systems too, but still nothing came up. They looked again at the card. The name was clear. The rank was clear, but everything else felt wrong. They returned to the rider. "Sir, we're not finding your information in the system. Do you have any other form of ID? Or can you explain which base you're from?" The rider shook his head. "I'm not allowed to explain." That only made things worse. One trooper said, "You're not under arrest, but we're going to need to detain you until we get this cleared up." The man didn't argue. He didn't resist. He just nodded and put his hands on the hood of the patrol car like he had done it before. The troopers began to search him for weapons or contraband. They found nothing. No wallet, no phone, no keys. Just a folded paper with strange codes and a badge inside his vest that had a silver eagle on it. The troopers didn't know what it meant as they searched. The older trooper noticed something on the inside of the man's vest, a patch. It wasn't the regular Army or Air Force patch. It was black and silver, with a dagger and a wing. Special Forces. The trooper looked closer. It also had small letters stitched in, JSOC. That was unfamiliar. He made a mental note to ask someone later. The rider remained calm, completely silent now. It was like he was waiting for something. The troopers didn't feel comfortable. Something about this stop felt wrong, but they couldn't explain why. All they knew was that they had a man on a mysterious motorcycle. with no ID in their systems and a military card they couldn't verify. Their job said they had to hold him until they figured it out. One of the troopers got on the radio and called for backup. "We've got a rider with a military ID that isn't checking out. This might be a stolen identity, requesting support." Dispatch responded and said they would send 2 more officers and check with the federal side. While they waited, the rider stood silently, eyes calm, like someone who had done this before. Not like a criminal, but like a soldier on standby. A couple of passing cars slowed down to look, but no one stopped. The troopers were feeling tense. They had no idea that just a few miles away, something huge was already moving. That short message the rider sent from his watch. It wasn't just a text. It was a signal, silent alert. And it had reached people who didn't wait for explanations at a nearby army facility. The alert had triggered a protocol. LT Cole was not just any soldier. He was part of a special operations unit that rarely appeared in public records. His missions were classified. His ID was not supposed to be in any civilian system for security reasons. The message he sent triggered an emergency code known as Shadow Echo, which meant operator detained in civilian zone, non-scollated. When that code was received, a chain reaction started. The base commander made one call. Within minutes, an entire convoy of military vehicles, armored Humvees, rapid deployment trucks, and a command vehicle started rolling out of the base. The mission was simple: retrieve LT Cole. No damage, no drama, but immediate action. Back. At the roadside, the troopers still didn't know what was coming. They were trying to contact someone who could confirm Cole's identity. Time was passing slowly. The rider stayed calm. He didn't ask questions, didn't try to run, didn't even look annoyed. He was just ... waiting. The younger trooper began pacing. Why would someone fake a military ID that well? Not even try to escape, the older one said. I don't think this guy's faking. I think we're missing something big. They were right, because out in the distance, dust was rising. A sound was coming low, deep, and steady. It's not the sound of traffic, not the sound of normal engines. It was something else. But for now, the troopers didn't know that a wave of military power was heading straight toward them. All they had was a black motorcycle, a silent rider, and a feeling in their gut that they might have made a very serious mistake. The air around the highway was still and heavy. The black motorcycle stood quietly on the side of the road. The rider, LT Aaron Cole, was calm, his hands placed on the hood of the police car just as the officers had told him. He did not seem angry or nervous. In fact, he looked like a man who was used to pressure. Someone who had faced much worse than being stopped on a quiet highway. The 2 troopers were growing uneasy. At first they thought they had simply stopped someone riding illegally, someone without plates. But now the situation was changing. They had a man with a military ID they couldn't verify. No information about him was showing up in their system. They had tried state records, federal records, and even military databases. The name LT Aaron R. Cole wasn't appearing anywhere. It was like he didn't exist at all. The younger trooper stepped away from the computer screen inside the cruiser and walked back toward the suspect. "Sir, we need more identification," he said. "Your ID isn't showing up in our systems. We need another form of proof. Driver's license? Any other documents?" Aaron didn't move, replied. "That ID is all I can legally show you." His voice was steady. There was no fear, no doubt, just calm words. The way he spoke made the older trooper take a step back and think. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't disrespect. It was something else. Confidence. But not the type of confidence you fake. It felt like the kind that comes from years of knowing how to handle danger. The younger officer looked irritated. "You understand why this looks suspicious, right? Riding without plates, wearing a helmet that hides your face, showing an ID we can't even verify. You can't expect us to just let you go." Aaron didn't respond. He wasn't trying to be rude. He simply knew that anything else he said might cause more problems. His silence was his protection and his strategy. Back in the cruiser, the older trooper tried calling in again. This time he asked to speak with someone from military command, anyone who could confirm the ID. But the line was slow. It was being transferred from one desk to another. Each time he explained the situation, the person on the other end said the same thing. Please hold. This request needs to be verified. As they waited, the younger trooper decided to detain Aaron officially. We'll have to take you in until we can get this cleared, he said. He moved toward the man and reached for his wrists to handcuff. Aaron didn't resist, but he gave one warning. I advise you not to escalate. Backup is already on the way. The trooper froze. Backup? Who did you call? I didn't call anyone, Aaron said. I sent a code. They'll come whether I want them to or not. The officers looked at each other. Now the older one was starting to believe that this man was not what he seemed. It was no longer a routine stop. Something much bigger was happening, and they were in the middle of it. They looked around, suddenly aware of how open and quiet the road was. No buildings. No civilians. Just endless highway and a man who seemed completely at peace, even while being detained. Then the younger officer noticed something strange on the man's gear. A patch inside his jacket. He leaned closer and saw the letters JSOC stitched neatly. He whispered to the older officer, I think he's Special Operations. Are you sure? No, but I've seen that patch before in documentaries. It's Joint Special Operations Command.
Now the officers were nervous. JSOC was a part of the military that most people never heard of.
If Aaron really was part of it, then detaining him without reason could be a serious mistake. But if he was lying, then that meant someone had forged military gear, fake IDs, and sent a fake emergency signal. So the older officer called for more backup, not just regular patrol units, but higher-ups from state-level law enforcement. And federal liaisons, he said over the radio, we may have a JSOC-level military operative detained, ID not confirmed. Situation tense, requesting guidance and additional units. They were told to stay put. Backup was on the way. Meanwhile, Aaron stood silently, watching the road. He knew what was coming. That short message he sent from his smartwatch had triggered a full response alert. In his unit, the code meant, operator detained without violence. In a civilian area, immediate retrieval required. It was a system only a few teams in the military had access to. The message was short, encrypted, and impossible to block. Within minutes of sending it, it had reached his base. Now, on the edge of town, a storm was forming. The command center had gone into emergency mode. The name LT Aaron R. Cole was known to every commander there, not just as a soldier, but as a key field operator involved in active missions. His presence in that area was confidential. The convoy he had traveled with had separated hours earlier, and he was riding solo for classified reasons. But his safety was a priority. 50 military vehicles were ordered to move. The soldiers inside didn't ask why. They only knew the alert came from LT Cole. That meant it was urgent. Armed Humvees, communication vehicles, tactical units, all began rolling out in a line down the road. The commander ordered that no harm was to come to any civilian, including law enforcement, but retrieval was non-negotiable. The man had to be extracted. Back at the roadside, the officers still had no idea what was coming. They continued to search for anyone who could confirm Aaron's identity. They thought they had done everything by the book, but now doubt was sinking in. The younger officer said, "You think we're in trouble?" The older one sighed, "I don't know. But if he's who I think he is, we just stopped the wrong person." Then it started. First, a faint sound, like a storm in the distance. Not thunder. Engines. Dozens of them. The kind you don't hear in regular traffic. The troopers looked down the road and saw dust rising. And then the shapes. Large, green, armored vehicles speeding in a straight line toward them, one after another. Humvees appeared, headlights shining, tires shaking the ground. The convoy wasn't slowing down. It was heading directly for their location. The officer stepped back, stunned. Aaron looked at them and said quietly, "Told you." The lead vehicle stopped just feet away from the scene. Soldiers jumped out with precision, forming a perimeter without pointing weapons. They weren't here to fight, but they were ready. If needed, then, from the front Humvee, a man stepped out. He wore a uniform with the rank of captain. His name tag read R. Monroe. He walked with purpose, not fear. His face was calm, but serious. He looked at Aaron, then turned to the two troopers. "Who's in charge here?" he asked. The older officer raised his hand slowly. "I am, sir." Monroe nodded. "L.T. Cole is one of ours. He was returning from a secure mission. He sent an alert. We're here to take him." The troopers tried to explain. "We didn't know, sir. His ID didn't show up in our system. We followed protocol." Monroe pulled out a black folder and handed them a sealed document. "Here's all the confirmation you need. I suggest you don't open it here. Just hand it to your supervisor." The troopers looked at the document, stunned. It had top clearance. Markings. This wasn't just about one soldier. This was about national security. Aaron stepped forward. Monroe nodded at him. "You good?" "Yes, sir." "Let's go. No arguments. No delay." Aaron walked back toward one of the Humvees. The soldiers stepped back, allowing him through. Didn't say anything to the officers. But his silence said everything. The older trooper finally whispered, "We stopped a ghost." The vehicles began turning. In less than 2 minutes, the entire convoy was gone, driving down the road the same way they came, leaving behind only tire marks and a thick cloud of dust. The troopers stood in silence. They weren't sure what. It just happened. All they knew was that the man they stopped was not just a biker without a license. He was something else. Someone trained, trusted, and protected at the highest level. And they had just learned what happens when you stop the wrong person. The dust in the distance was no longer just a blur. It had become a thick cloud, rolling like smoke across the empty highway. The sound behind it had changed too, louder now, deeper, and unmistakably heavy. The vibration of dozens of engines reached the ground beneath the troopers' boots. Something big was coming. Both officers could feel it before they could fully see it. The younger trooper took a step back, squinting through the haze. "What is that?" The older trooper didn't answer right away. Was trying to understand it too. And then the shapes started to appear through the dust, green armored vehicles. One after another, driving in tight formation like they'd practiced this movement 100 times before. At the front of the convoy was a massive Humvee, matte, black with heavy tires and a small flag on the antenna. It moved like a tank, unstoppable and purposeful. There were more vehicles behind it. More Humvees. Tactical trucks. Satellite vans. Some of the vehicles had soldiers standing at the back, holding onto rails, their eyes alert and scanning the area. Their uniforms weren't like regular army gear. These soldiers wore darker outfits with lighter armor, patches with no names, and faces that looked emotionless and trained for the worst. In total, there were over 50 military vehicles approaching a full rapid deployment unit, and they were coming straight for the spot where 2 highway troopers had detained one man on a motorcycle. The troopers froze. The younger one finally broke the silence. "Are we about to be arrested?" the older one whispered. "No, we're about to be reminded that we're very, very small in a world much bigger than us." Aaron Cole didn't move. He was still standing near the police cruiser, helmet in hand now. His eyes followed the convoy calmly, almost like he had seen it happen before. He looked at peace. He wasn't worried, not angry, not smug, just waiting. The lead Humvee stopped a few feet from the cruiser. With a hiss of air and metal, the door swung open. A tall man stepped out. He was dressed in a perfectly fitted army uniform with captain's stripes on both shoulders. His boots were polished, his eyes cold, but focused. He didn't shout, he didn't run. He simply walked forward with absolute control. His name tag read, Capt. R. Monroe. He stopped in front of the troopers, nodded once, and then turned. "To Aaron, Lieutenant," he said calmly. "You all right?" Aaron nodded once. "Yes, sir." Monroe looked at the 2 officers. "Which one of you is in charge?" The older trooper raised his hand. "I am." Monroe looked him straight in the eyes. His voice was calm but powerful. "You're currently detaining a JSOC operative on active status. That's a problem." The younger trooper stepped in. "Sir, we didn't mean any harm. His ID didn't show up. We couldn't confirm anything. We followed proper procedure." "I understand," Monroe said. "But you should have called someone higher before putting your hands on him. There are channels for this. You skipped them." The officers didn't argue. They didn't try to defend themselves anymore. By now, they knew this situation had gone far beyond their control. Monroe pulled out a black envelope with a red seal and handed it to the senior trooper. "This is for your commanding officer. Do not open it. Do not copy it. Deliver it by hand. Understand?" The trooper took it. With shaking hands, "Yes, sir." Behind Monroe, soldiers had formed a quiet perimeter around the area. No weapons were drawn, but every man and woman standing there looked ready to act in a split second. The air was thick with tension, but no one said a word. Aaron walked toward the Humvee slowly. As he passed the troopers, he gave a short nod. Not rude, not mocking, just a silent message: "You did your job. So did I." He stepped into the Humvee and disappeared inside. Monroe gave one last glance to the officers. He was on a return route from an active mission, classified. His bike is a military vehicle with encrypted technology. The ID was scrubbed on purpose. He wasn't supposed to be stopped. The troopers both nodded, speechless, and one more thing, Monroe added. "He warned you backup was coming." That alone should have told you who he was. Monroe turned, walked back to his vehicle, and the convoy started to move again. One by one, the vehicles turned in perfect formation. No wasted motion, no honking horns, no shouting, just quiet power rolling away as fast as they had arrived. The entire moment lasted less than 10 minutes, but it left behind an impression that would never fade. The troopers stood there, stunned. The younger one finally sat down on the hood of the cruiser. "I think I just aged 10 years. The older one rubbed his forehead. "I've been a cop for 22 years. Never, and I mean never, have I seen anything like that." They both looked down the road where the convoy had vanished. There was only a thin trail of dust left now, floating lazily in the air like smoke after a fire. They still didn't know exactly who Aaron Cole was, what his mission had been, or where he was going next. But what they did know was that the man they had treated like a suspicious biker was, in fact, part of something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. The older trooper sighed and looked at the black envelope in his hand. "I need to get this back to HQ now." They got into the cruiser, started the engine, and drove off in silence. Miles away. Inside the command vehicle, Captain Monroe sat next to Aaron. "You all right?" he asked again, more softly this time. Aaron nodded. "They were just doing their job. No harm done." Monroe glanced sideways. "You should have let them run your ID through the echo channel. It would have cleared in 30 seconds. Aaron looked out the window. "Didn't want to blow the mission. Had to stay invisible till I got back." Monroe nodded slowly. "You're not invisible anymore." Aaron allowed himself a small smile. "Didn't think they'd cuff me." That was new. They both chuckled quietly. In the back of the Humvee, Aaron leaned against the seat and closed his eyes for a moment. The mission was over. The ride was almost done. And soon, he'd disappear back into the shadows again, unseen, unknown, and unstoppable. But out on that quiet highway in Colorado, two troopers would never forget the moment when the silent man on the black motorcycle was suddenly surrounded by 50 armored vehicles and led away by a captain, because they had stopped the wrong bike. And within minutes, the entire U.S. military had arrived to make it right. The highway was empty again. The dust had settled. The deep sounds of military engines were gone, leaving behind only the soft noise of the wind brushing across the road. But the silence wasn't peaceful. For the two state troopers, it was filled with confusion, tension, and a strange kind of fear. Not the fear of being hurt, but the fear that they had unknowingly walked into something far above their level. The older trooper held the sealed black envelope tightly in his hand. Its red markings and clear for command only label told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't something ordinary. They hadn't just stopped a speeding motorcycle. They had pulled over a man whose identity was so protected that even their own systems couldn't confirm it. And now, 50 military vehicles had shown up, stayed for only a few minutes, and vanished like ghosts. Inside the patrol car, both officers sat in silence for a while. The younger one was still trying to understand what had happened. He finally spoke, his voice low. "Do you think we're going to get fired?" The older trooper shook his head. "I don't know. But we'll definitely have to answer for this." They both knew this was going to reach their commanding officers quickly, probably before they even arrived back at the station. The military didn't send that kind of force for no reason. The sealed envelope in their hands wasn't just a message, it was proof. And proof always came with questions. Back at the State Patrol office, their captain was already waiting for them when they arrived. He stood at the door, arms crossed, face tight. Without a word, the older trooper handed him the envelope. The captain opened it in private, behind a closed door. No one else saw what was inside. But when he came back out, his face had changed. Not angry, not confused, just serious. He looked at his officers and said, "You did your job. You followed protocol. But from now on, any stop that involves unclear military ID needs to be reported directly to me. Not to dispatch, not to records. To me." They both nodded.
Aid.
The captain paused, then added, "You'll be debriefed by a federal contact tomorrow. It's not for punishment, it's for understanding." That was all he said before walking back into his office and closing the door. Later that evening, the older trooper sat in his living room, replaying the moment in his head over and over again. He kept seeing Aaron Cole's calm face, his voice, his warning. Backup is already on the way. He thought about the way Aaron never panicked, never resisted. It wasn't the behavior of a man trying to escape. That was the behavior of a man who knew exactly who he was and what would happen next. The next day, 2 men in suits arrived at the precinct. They didn't wear badges like normal federal agents. They showed identification, but it was different. Short, coded, no full names. They met privately with the 2 officers. The conversation lasted about an hour. The agents explained some, but not all, of what had happened. They said LT Aaron Cole was a classified operative working under Joint Special Operations Command. His travel was meant to be untraceable. For national security reasons, the motorcycle had no plates because it was a military vehicle designed for stealth operations. The reason the officers couldn't find any records was because the entire file was sealed under. Level 6 clearance, higher than what even FBI databases could see, one of the agents said calmly. "You weren't wrong to stop him. You saw. Potential threat. That's your job. But once the ID was presented, you should have backed off. There were clues," the younger trooper asked. "Like what clues?" The agent replied, "For one, the patch on his vest. JSOC patches aren't common. 2, the fact that he didn't resist, didn't run, and warned you backup was coming. That's not how someone with fake ID behaves. That's how someone with trust in his chain of command behaves." The officers nodded. They were listening. Carefully, the other agent leaned forward and added, "He sent what we call a shadow echo signal. It's a one-touch encrypted alert used only by Tier 1 operatives. When that signal is activated, a recovery unit is launched instantly. That's what you saw. The convoy. The captain. That's what they were responding to." The older trooper asked, "Did we mess up his mission?" There was a pause. Then one of the agents said, "No, but you could have." Luckily, LT Cole stayed professional. He de-escalated. "That's why you're not in trouble today. But if this had gone differently, if someone had overreacted, it would have been a national incident." That statement hit hard. The officers realized just how close they had come to being in a situation that could have gone terribly wrong. They hadn't just pulled over a biker. They had stopped a man who operated in the shadows of wars, covert missions, and dangerous regions. A man who didn't even exist in normal systems, because his life was hidden for a reason. After the agents left, the 2 troopers sat alone again. This time there was no fear, just reflection. The younger one said quietly, "I kept thinking we were dealing with a criminal. But he was the most dangerous guy on that road, and he didn't have to say a word." The older trooper nodded. He was trained to stay calm under pressure. "I've never seen anything like that." Days passed. The story never made the news. No one outside of law enforcement and the military ever heard about what happened. But among the officers at the precinct, the story spread quickly. They all heard about the man on the black motorcycle, the ID that didn't exist, and the army that showed up to collect him. The younger officer decided to do some research, whatever was allowed publicly. He looked up the symbol he had seen. On Aaron's patch, a dagger with wings and a lightning bolt behind it belonged to Tier 1 special mission units, the ones that don't advertise. The ones used for the hardest missions, hostage rescues, deep intelligence, surgical raids in foreign territory. He realized then that Aaron wasn't just a soldier. He was one of the best soldiers in the world. Back at the military base, Captain Monroe reviewed the incident report. He respected Cole. The man had handled the situation exactly how he was trained. No violence, no panic. He had trusted his team to respond, and they did. Monroe met with Cole later that evening. "You good?" he asked. Cole replied, "Yes, sir. You?" "Sure." Cole nodded. "I knew they weren't trying to hurt me. They were just doing their job." Monroe leaned back in his chair. "It's easy to forget, but not everyone out there knows who you are. You show up in that gear. No ID in the system. No license plate. You look like a threat." "I know," Cole said. "But I couldn't risk breaking cover. Even a small leak can compromise an entire operation." Monroe agreed. "It right. Let's just hope they learned something from it too." Cole was silent for a moment, then asked, "Will there be any consequences for them?" "No, we're not here to punish people for doing their job. We're here to make sure they understand how to spot someone like you next time and not make the same mistake twice." That evening, Cole sat alone in his barracks, thinking. He had been trained for combat, survival, and missions most people would never even imagine. But nothing in training had prepared him for the strange moment of being stopped by two regular highway officers, honest men, just doing their jobs, completely unaware of who he was or what he carried. He didn't blame them. In fact, he respected their commitment. They had stayed calm. They hadn't hurt him. They didn't pull their weapons even when they were confused. And most importantly, they had treated him with caution, not cruelty in a way. It's reminded him that sometimes ordinary people can do the right thing even when they don't understand the full story. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most important lesson of all, because power wasn't just about guns or trucks or secret missions. Sometimes it was about staying calm, staying smart, remembering that behind every uniform, whether it's camo or blue, there's a human being, trying to do the right thing. It had been 3 days since the strange incident on the quiet Colorado highway. For most people, life had gone back to normal. Cars continued to pass by the same road, unaware that just a few feet from where they drove, a man had been stopped. Who was no ordinary person. That man, Lieutenant Aaron Cole, had returned to his military base with no sign of stress, no complaint, and no hesitation. But the event had left behind waves, silent waves that moved through law enforcement circles, military command rooms, and even the minds of the two state troopers who had made the stop. The older trooper, Officer Martin, hadn't spoken much. Since that day, the younger one, Officer Davis, kept replaying everything in his head: the black motorcycle, the emotionless voice, the calm warning, "Backup is already on the way." That one sentence still echoed in his mind. He'd seen many suspects in his career, but none like Aaron. There had been no fear in his body, not even a flicker of doubt. And when the military convoy arrived, the truth was too big to forget. At the precinct, things were unusually quiet. The black envelope they had handed to their captain had been taken to a state-level office. No one told them what it said. Number. One asked them for follow-up. It was as if someone higher had put a seal of silence on the whole thing. Then came a closed-door meeting. The officers were told they would be part of a special training session, a briefing conducted by federal agents and military officials. The reason? To teach officers how to recognize, assess, and respond when encountering personnel involved in classified or covert operations. It was clear that the event wasn't just being ignored. It was being used as a lesson in that meeting. A senior official explained something that stuck with both Martin and Davis. He said, "Not everyone who looks like a threat is one. Some threats wear smiles. Some heroes wear silence." The official didn't mention Aaron Cole by name. He didn't have to. Everyone in that room knew who the story was really about. Meanwhile, far from the precinct, back on the military base, Aaron stood in the open yard, watching the sunrise. His black motorcycle, cleaned and secured, stood parked near the edge of the compound. It was more than just a vehicle. It was a tool, a lifeline, and in many ways a symbol of who he was. Quiet, fast, and built for purpose. Captain Monroe approached. From behind, "You're not usually out this early," he said. Aaron nodded without turning. "Just needed some quiet." Monroe stood beside him. "They're not in trouble, I checked." "I know," Aaron said. "They were decent men." "That they were," Monroe agreed. "Most officers would have drawn their guns. One wrong move, and this whole thing could have turned into a news story the Pentagon would spend weeks trying to bury." Aaron looked. At him, they showed restraint. Monroe gave a slight smile. "You showed more." There was a brief silence before Monroe added, "You'll be reassigned in a week." Another mission. Overseas. Aaron simply nodded. Monroe hesitated. "You ever think about walking away? Getting out of all this?" Aaron finally turned. "And do what? Drive trucks? Fix fences?" "This is what I was made for." Monroe didn't argue. He knew men like Aaron, who didn't just serve in the military, but lived in it. Men who had become part of its invisible fabric, doing things that would never be written down, but which held the world together in secret. But that didn't mean the world always understood them. That night, Officer Davis sat at home in his small apartment. He opened his laptop and typed the words, "Joint Special Operations Command." The search results were vague, mostly news articles, some old reports, and a few images. But one phrase caught his eye: Tier 1 units operate in silence. Their success is measured not in headlines, but in the absence of chaos. He stared at those words for a while. Then he closed his laptop and leaned back. "I met one of them," he whispered to himself. A few days later, both troopers received. An enveloped, not sealed like the one before, but plain. Inside was a simple letter. It had no signature, no name. Only a short handwritten message on clean white paper. "You did what was right." Sometimes that's enough. Davis looked at Martin. "What? Do you think this is from him?" Martin nodded slowly. "Who else would it be? They didn't show the letter to anyone. They just folded it and placed it in the drawer. Some truths didn't need to be shared. Some experiences weren't meant for the public, but they were real. And then, as if the world wanted to bring everything full circle, another strange thing happened. One afternoon, Davis was called to a school to give a safety talk. When he arrived, he noticed a quiet man sitting in the back of the gym, watching silently. He wore a hoodie and jeans. It's not military gear, not a uniform. But when their eyes met, Davis recognized him instantly. Aaron gave a nod, barely a motion. Then he stood and walked out. Davis didn't say anything to the children, just looked at the door, knowing exactly what had happened. That was goodbye. That was closure. Back at the base, Aaron geared up again. Another mission. Another place. Another set of unknown roads. He climbed onto his black motorcycle and started the engine. As the gates opened, he sped out, not too fast, not too slow. It's just enough to become part of the wind again. Quiet, unseen. And though he would vanish from the headlines, from the systems, and from memory, 2 troopers in Colorado would always remember the day they stopped a man who didn't exist, the army that came for him. Because sometimes, the most powerful moments in life don't make noise. They leave silence. And that silence says everything.